The first explosion tore through the air like a thunderclap, rattling the ground beneath Sergeant Jack Callahan's boots. Dust and shrapnel whizzed past his head, the sky above choked with smoke and burning debris. The alien sky was an unnatural shade of deep violet, the kind of color that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Right now, it was just another thing pissing him off. Callahan ducked behind the remains of a crashed shuttle, tapping his helmet's command. "This is Callahan. I'm pinned down at LZ Bravo. Over." Static. More explosions rocked the battlefield, the scent of scorched metal thick in the air. Callahan gritted his teeth, wiping blood from his brow. His squad was gone, evaporated in the opening minutes of the enemy's assault. The aliens had underestimated them, assumed that the humans were weak, easy prey. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Xal'Zor Dominion was a ruthless, war-hardened empire spanning across dozens of star systems. Their warriors, towering reptilian brutes, stood over 8 feet tall, their scales impervious to most projectile weapons. Humanity was the new kid on the galactic block, fresh meat in a universe full of predators. Unfortunately for the Xal'Zor, they had never met a united Earth Marine. A shriek split the air, guttural and unnatural. Callahan peeked over his cover to see one of the Xal'Zor charging toward him, its massive plasma rifle glowing hot. It stomped across the battlefield, each footfall shaking the ground. He had 3 bullets left in his rifle. Not enough. But Callahan wasn't the type to play fair. As the Xal'Zor closed in, he yanked a combat knife from his belt, waiting. 10 feet. 5 feet. Then, at the last moment, he sidestepped, driving the knife into the soft, exposed flesh beneath the alien's chin. The creature gurgled, clawing at its throat, before collapsing in a heap. Callahan didn't wait for it to hit the ground. He grabbed the alien's plasma rifle and kept moving. He needed to find survivors. The landscape around him was littered with the smoldering remains of human dropships. This was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission, a first contact exercise with the Xal'Zor's diplomatic faction. Instead, the moment the humans had landed, the aliens had opened fire. Clearly, they weren't interested in negotiations. Callahan sprinted between burning wreckage, scanning for any sign of life. His armor's HUD flickered, displaying faint heat signatures ahead. He gripped his stolen plasma rifle tighter, moving cautiously. Behind an overturned vehicle, he found them, 3 Marines huddled together, their armor charred but intact. "Sergeant." One of them, a young private, looked up in disbelief. "You're alive?" "Damn right I am." Callahan crouched beside them. "You 3 good to fight?" The Marines exchanged weary glances before nodding. "Good. Because we're getting out of here, and I'll be damned if I leave any human behind." A distant rumble drew his attention. A Xal'Zor troop transport, sleek and covered in pulsating alien glyphs, hovered over the battlefield, deploying reinforcements. Callahan smirked. "Looks like we're stealing ourselves a ride." The Marines stared at him, stunned. "You're joking, right?" one of them muttered. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Callahan checked the plasma rifle's charge. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and stranded on an alien world crawling with hostiles. Our only way out is through that ship." One of the Marines, Corporal Vance, chuckled dryly. "Hell, I like those odds." They moved swiftly, using the battlefield's chaos to their advantage. The Xal'Zor were focused on mopping up the remaining humans, assuming resistance was futile. That was their first mistake. The second was underestimating a pissed-off human with nothing to lose. As they neared the transport, Callahan gestured for the others to hold. A squad of Xal'Zor warriors stood guard at the loading ramp, massive plasma carbines in hand. "We need a distraction," Vance whispered. Callahan's mind worked fast. "Private, you still got that thermite charge." The young Marine fished a small explosive device from his belt, nodding. "Good. Set it on that wreckage over there," Callahan instructed. "On my mark. Blow it. That'll give us an opening." The private crept away, moving low. Callahan and Vance positioned themselves behind cover, waiting. Seconds ticked by. Then, boom. The explosion ripped through the wreckage, sending metal shards flying. The Xal'Zor guards snapped their heads toward the blast, momentarily distracted. That was all Callahan needed. Go, he barked, charging forward. The first alien barely had time to react before Callahan's plasma rifle cut it down. The second roared in surprise, swinging a massive clawed arm toward him. He ducked, pivoting, and drove his knife into the alien's gut. Vance and the others followed suit, gunning down the remaining guards. The ramp was clear. They sprinted inside, sealing the hatch behind them. The ship's interior was a maze of glowing consoles and humming machinery, the air thick with an acrid, metallic scent. "We need to find the bridge," Callahan said. A deep, guttural voice echoed from the hallway ahead. "You do not belong here, human." A Xal'Zor officer emerged, clad in ornate battle armor, eyes glowing with fury. Callahan raised his plasma rifle. "Neither do you." He fired. The alien dodged with surprising speed, lunging at him. Callahan barely had time to roll aside as a massive fist smashed into the wall where he'd just been standing. Vance opened fire, but the officer's armor absorbed the shots. Callahan knew they wouldn't win a straight fight. He needed to get creative. Spotting an exposed energy conduit near the wall, he made a snap decision. "Cover me." Vance and the others laid down suppressive fire as Callahan sprinted toward the conduit. The Xal'Zor officer roared, charging after him. At the last second, Callahan yanked a combat knife from his belt and drove it into the exposed wiring. Sparks erupted. Electricity arced through the air, surging into the officer. The alien convulsed, letting out a strangled cry before collapsing, smoke rising from its body. Silence filled the corridor. "Well," Vance panted, "that was one hell of a gamble." Callahan grinned. "Yeah, but it worked." They moved quickly after that, taking the bridge within minutes. The Xal'Zor pilots barely had time to react before Callahan and his team subdued them. He slid into the captain's chair, glancing over the alien controls. "You know how to fly this thing?" the private asked. Callahan cracked his knuckles. "Guess we're about to find out." The ship rumbled to life beneath him. Outside, Xal'Zor forces began to realize what was happening. Alarms blared across the battlefield. Callahan smirked. "Too late, assholes." As the ship lifted off, breaking through the planet's atmosphere, Callahan leaned back in his seat, exhaling. The Xal'Zor thought humanity was weak. They had no idea what was coming. And this was only the beginning. The alien vessel shuddered as it broke through the thick atmosphere, the hull groaning under the strain of acceleration. Sergeant Jack Callahan gritted his teeth, wrestling with the controls. The Xal'Zor's tech was unlike anything he had ever seen. Glowing symbols, shifting panels, and an interface that seemed more organic than mechanical. "Vance, get on comms," he barked. "See if you can tap into their communications. We need to know what we're flying into." The corporal slid into a nearby console, tapping at the glowing symbols. "If I had a damn clue what any of this meant, I'd be a lot more useful." Callahan didn't have time to reply. The ship's warning system screamed to life, flashing pulsating red across the control panels. Outside the viewport, two sleek Xal'Zor fighters pivoted, breaking formation and angling straight for them. "Shit," the private muttered. "They are not letting us go without a fight." "Like hell they are," Callahan snapped. He yanked the controls, feeling the ship lurch violently to the side. The alien vessel was sluggish, built for transport rather than combat, but he didn't need it to be nimble. He just needed it to hold together long enough to get them out of the kill zone. The first plasma volley tore past them, lighting up the void in streaks of burning green. "Hang on," Callahan yelled. He threw the ship into a sharp roll, just as another barrage sizzled by, barely missing the engines. Alarms wailed across the bridge. "Vance, find me some damn weapons." Callahan barked. "I'm trying. Nothing's labeled in English, you know." Vance shot back, frantically pressing glowing symbols. Callahan glanced at the HUD. The fighters were closing fast, weaving through debris with practiced precision. If he didn't do something soon, they were dead. Another blast rocked the ship. Sparks flew from the ceiling. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," Callahan growled. Then, just as the enemy fighters lined up another shot, the ship's hull vibrated with a deep thrum. I think I did something, Vance muttered. Outside, the transport's underbelly split open, revealing a bank of pulse cannons. Without warning, they roared to life. Bolts of searing energy erupted, catching the lead Xal'Zor fighter square in the fuselage. The ship detonated in a spectacular explosion, debris scattering into the void. Holy shit, the private gasped. The second fighter broke off, diving to avoid the wreckage. Callahan seized the opportunity, yanking the controls and cutting hard to the right. Come on, you scaly bastard, he muttered under his breath. The fighter looped around, adjusting course for another attack run. Callahan's fingers tightened around the controls. The ship was sluggish, its response time frustratingly slow, but if he could bait the bastard in close enough. Vance, he called, next time I tell you to fire, you hit that button again. Understood. Yeah, but what's the plan? Not dying. Callahan cut the engines for half a second. The ship lurched, the sudden drop in speed throwing them forward. The Xal'Zor fighter, unprepared for the maneuver, shot past them. Now! Callahan roared. Vance slammed his hand on the console. A barrage of pulse fire screamed from the ship's cannons, punching through the enemy fighter's engines. The craft spiraled out of control, flames consuming its hull before it exploded in a blinding fireball. The Marines let out a collective breath. Jesus, the private exhaled. You sure you ain't a pilot, Sarge? Not officially, Callahan said with a smirk. Then the alarms blared again. Now what? Vance groaned. Callahan checked the sensors, and his stomach tightened. A Xal'Zor battleship had just emerged from the planet's shadow, and it was gunning straight for them. A deep, echoing voice crackled over the ship's comms, guttural and filled with barely restrained fury. Humans. The voice rumbled through the bridge like distant thunder. You have stolen what is ours. You will surrender immediately, or be annihilated. Vance muttered, I vote annihilation. Callahan ignored him, gripping the controls. Can we outrun them? No chance, the private said. That thing's built for war. We're in a glorified cargo hauler. Callahan's mind raced. There had to be another way out. Sarge, Vance said suddenly, tapping at his console. I think I found something. What? Vance hesitated. Hyperdrive. Callahan's head snapped toward him. You sure? As sure as I am that this alien language looks like spaghetti. Can you activate it? I can try. Callahan exhaled sharply. Do it. Vance started pressing glowing sigils, his face twisted in concentration. The battleship was gaining on them, its massive silhouette blotting out the stars. The HUD flickered, warning of an imminent weapons lock. Then the ship's interior lights flickered. A deep hum vibrated through the hull. I think, Vance started. The ship suddenly lurched. Space twisted around them. The Xal'Zor battleship vanished in a swirl of distorted light. The stars stretched, warped, and then snapped back into focus. Silence. Then, we're alive, the private breathed. Holy shit. Callahan exhaled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. Good work, Vance. The corporal grinned. Honestly, I just started mashing buttons. Callahan chuckled, shaking his head. I don't care how you did it. You got us out. He turned his attention to the ship's sensors. Now, where the hell are we? Vance frowned at his console. Sarge, you might want to see this. Callahan leaned over his shoulder. What he saw made his stomach drop. The map displayed a swirling mass of red markers surrounding their position. They hadn't escaped the Xal'Zor. They had jumped straight into a goddamn war zone. Outside the viewport, space was alive with fire and destruction. Human warships clashed with Xal'Zor fleets in a full-scale battle. Explosions rippled across the void, wreckage tumbling through the darkness. And they were smack dab in the middle of it. Well, Vance muttered, guess we're right back in the shit. The comms crackled to life. Unidentified vessel. This is Admiral Hayes of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Identify yourself immediately or be fired upon. Callahan slammed the comms button. This is Sergeant Jack Callahan, United Earth Marines. We've hijacked a Xal'Zor transport and need immediate extraction. There was a pause. Then, Sergeant Callahan. The voice was sharp with disbelief. You're supposed to be dead. Yeah, well, Callahan smirked, I'm a hard man to kill. Another pause. Then, the Admiral's voice came back, this time sharper. Sergeant, you just jumped into the middle of a counteroffensive. The Xal'Zor are throwing everything they've got at us. Perfect, Callahan said dryly. That means they are distracted. Sergeant. Listen, Callahan interrupted. We're not just some lost grunts. We've got their ship. We've got their weapons. And I bet we've got a damn good way to punch a hole in their lines. Silence. Then the Admiral's voice came back, slow and deliberate. What are you suggesting? Callahan leaned forward, his smirk turning into a full grin. I'm suggesting we take this stolen ship, he said, and ram it straight down the throat of their flagship. Vance let out a low whistle. You're insane, Sarge. Callahan's grin widened. Damn right I am. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then, he said the only words that mattered. Do it. Callahan cracked his knuckles. All right, boys, he said, gripping the controls. Let's show these lizard bastards why you never mess with a human. The ship roared as it turned toward the heart of the battle. And the real fight began. The stolen Xal'Zor transport rocketed toward the heart of the battle, its engines screaming as it cut through the void. Plasma fire streaked past, the space around them a chaotic maelstrom of burning wreckage and dying ships. The United Earth Defense Fleet was locked in brutal combat with the Xal'Zor Armada, massive cruisers exchanging hellfire while fighter squadrons weaved through the carnage. And in the middle of it all, Sergeant Jack Callahan was flying a stolen enemy ship straight into the maw of the Xal'Zor flagship. All right, Callahan, let's go over this again. Admiral Hayes' voice crackled through the comms. You're telling me your plan is to fly inside the enemy's command ship? That's right, sir, Callahan said, yanking the controls to avoid a barrage of enemy fire. Right through their hangar bay. That's suicide. Callahan smirked. Maybe, but if we take out their command structure, we can end this fight before the bastards get the upper hand. There was a pause. Then, you've got balls, Marine. Damn right I do. The comms cut out as a trio of Xal'Zor interceptors broke away from the main battle, angling straight for them. Their sleek, insect-like bodies gleamed under the light of distant explosions, their plasma cannons glowing hot. Vance muttered, Incoming. 3 bogies. Private, get on that turret, Callahan ordered. Vance, you still got that button-mashing magic in you. Always, Vance grinned, already pressing symbols at random. The Bella-mounted pulse cannons roared to life, spewing a hailstorm of deadly fire. The lead interceptor juked hard, avoiding the barrage. But the second wasn't as lucky. Pulse rounds shredded through its wing, sending it spiraling into the wreckage of a nearby cruiser. 1 down, the private whooped. 2 to go. The remaining 2 fighters twisted through space with predatory precision, circling their ship like vultures. Callahan rolled the transport hard to the right, narrowly dodging another plasma burst. The stolen ship was sluggish, but if he could just... Vance, hit the reverse thrusters on my mark, Callahan barked. What? Just do it. The interceptors adjusted their trajectory, closing in for the kill. Callahan counted to 3. Now. Vance slammed his hand on the panel. The stolen transport jerked to an almost full stop. The sudden deceleration caught the Xal'Zor pilots off guard. 1 shot past them, unable to react in time. And the private didn't waste the opportunity. He squeezed the trigger, and the pulse cannon spat pure death. The interceptor exploded in a brilliant flash. The last one, however, was already reacting. It spun around, wings flaring, plasma cannons charging. Callahan grinned. Gotcha. He slammed the throttle forward. The stolen ship surged ahead, straight toward the enemy fighter. The Xal'Zor pilot had a fraction of a second to realize what was happening before Callahan's transport rammed into it. The collision was devastating, the smaller craft crumpling under the impact. The Xal'Zor ship erupted in a fireball, its wreckage bouncing off their hull. Jesus, Sarge, Vance coughed. You're trying to kill us before we even reach the target. Not dead, are we? Callahan shot back, eyes already locked on their destination. The Xal'Zor flagship loomed ahead, a monstrosity of blackened metal glowing with eerie, pulsating energy. Spikes of dark alloy jutted from its hull like the fangs of some ancient predator. It was easily 3 times the size of the largest human battleship, a floating fortress in the void. Callahan's grip tightened around the controls. "All right, boys," he growled. "We're going in." The flagship's defenses were already tracking them. Automated turrets pivoted, targeting systems locking onto the stolen transport. Then the barrage began. A wall of plasma fire erupted from the flagship's defenses, filling the void with streaks of green death. Callahan wove the ship through the onslaught, twisting and diving, barely avoiding the worst of it. But the transport wasn't built for dogfighting, and it wasn't long before the first hits landed. The ship shuddered as energy blasts tore through the shields, burning through the hull. "Shields down to 30%. Vance shouted. "We won't last long at this rate." "We just need to last long enough," Callahan gritted out. The hangar bay was ahead, a massive gaping maw at the base of the flagship. Hundreds of Xal'Zor soldiers and fighters were already mobilizing inside, scrambling to intercept the incoming transport. Callahan didn't slow down. "Brace for impact." The transport roared forward. The moment they crossed the threshold of the hangar, Callahan cut the engines and let gravity do the rest. The transport crashed into the deck, skidding across the metallic floor in a shower of sparks and fire. It smashed through a row of docked enemy fighters, leaving a trail of wreckage before finally coming to a screeching halt. Then, for a brief moment, everything was silent. Then the alarms started blaring. Callahan unbuckled his harness, grabbing his rifle. "We move now." The Marines burst out of the transport, weapons hot. The Xal'Zor inside the hangar was still recovering from the crash, and Callahan took full advantage of their hesitation. His rifle barked, cutting down the first alien soldier before it could react. Vance and the private followed suit, laying down suppressive fire as they pushed forward. The hangar erupted into chaos. Xal'Zor warriors, towering and heavily armored, roared as they charged. Callahan dodged a swipe from one of the massive brutes, rolling beneath its arm and shoving his combat knife into the soft flesh beneath its chin. The alien gurgled and collapsed. "Vance, where's our target?" Callahan barked. Vance was already working on a nearby terminal, frantically scanning alien schematics. "Command center's 3 levels up. Then we take the damn stairs." More Xal'Zor soldiers poured into the hangar. Callahan didn't waste time. He snatched a plasma grenade from a fallen alien, armed it, and tossed it toward the reinforcements. Boom! The explosion rocked the hangar, sending alien bodies flying. "This way!" Callahan shouted. The Marines moved fast, weaving through corridors filled with flickering red warning lights. The Xal'Zor ship was alive with activity now, warriors mobilizing, preparing to crush the human invaders. Callahan welcomed the challenge. They reached the central elevator, but as expected, it was locked. "Vance," Callahan called. The corporal was already working, hacking into the controls. "Give me a sec." They didn't have a sec. A squad of Xal'Zor elites rounded the corner, heavily armored, their plasma rifles glowing ominously. "Shit." The private ducked behind cover. "We got company." "Hold them off," Callahan ordered. The hallway erupted in gunfire. Callahan charged forward, ducking between bursts of plasma. He closed the distance fast, grabbing one of the elite's rifles and yanking it downward. The alien snarled, trying to rip free, but Callahan was faster. He spun the rifle around and pulled the trigger. The elite's own weapon tore through its chest. The remaining elites hesitated. Callahan didn't. He grabbed another plasma grenade, primed it, and shoved it down the throat of the nearest alien. The explosion was beautiful. Vance whooped. "Sarge, you are one crazy son of a bitch." "Damn right I am," Callahan panted. "Now tell me you got that elevator working." A chime rang out. The doors slid open. "Ask and you shall receive," Vance smirked. "Then let's finish this." The Marines piled in. As the elevator rocketed upward, Callahan clenched his fists. The Xal'Zor High Command was just ahead, and they had no idea what was coming. The elevator shot upward, the hum of alien machinery vibrating through the walls. Sergeant Jack Callahan reloaded his rifle, his jaw tight. Vance stood beside him, shaking out his hands. "I can't believe we're doing this." The private, still breathing heavily from the last firefight, let out a nervous chuckle. "Storming the command center of an alien flagship with 3 guys and a stolen ship? This is beyond insane." Callahan didn't look up. "We're Marines. We make beyond insane look easy." The elevator slowed, and a low, mechanical chime echoed through the walls. Callahan's grip tightened on his rifle. This was it, the heart of the Xal'Zor Command, the place where they pulled the strings, where they directed fleets, where they plotted humanity's extinction. The doors slid open. Hell greeted them. The command center was massive, stretching out in all directions, its walls lined with pulsing red glyphs and holographic displays. Towering Xal'Zor officers in ornate armor turned toward the humans, their eyes gleaming with hatred. At the far end of the room, a throne of obsidian metal loomed over the scene, perched atop a raised dais. And sitting upon it, watching with cold amusement, was Overlord Craxus, the supreme commander of the Xal'Zor Dominion, 8 feet of scaled muscle, adorned in gold-plated war armor. His yellow eyes burned like twin suns as he leaned forward, resting his clawed fingers on the armrests of his throne. "Humans," Craxus rumbled, his voice thick with contempt. "You are bold, but also foolish." Callahan raised his rifle. "We'll see about that." The room exploded into action. The Xal'Zor commanders lunged, drawing energy blades and plasma weapons. Callahan dove into cover, rolling behind a control console as plasma fire tore through the air. Vance and the private followed suit, laying down suppressive fire to hold back the charging warriors. The throne room erupted into chaos. Callahan popped up, his rifle barking 3 sharp bursts. A Xal'Zor officer staggered back, its chest punctured by human lead. Another rushed toward him, swinging a glowing energy blade. Callahan barely dodged, feeling the heat singe his armor. He countered, driving his combat knife into the alien's throat. Vance took down another with a well-placed shot. "Sarge, we're getting overwhelmed." "No kidding." More Xal'Zor stormed in from the side entrances, filling the chamber with enemy reinforcements. They were trapped, and Craxus was still watching. The Overlord hadn't moved. He just observed, his expression unreadable, as if he had already won. Callahan gritted his teeth. "No, not today. They needed to end this now." He glanced up. Above Craxus' throne, the ship's primary command interface pulsed with energy. That was their way out. If they disabled the ship's controls, they could cripple the flagship, disrupt communications, maybe even turn its weapons on the fleet outside. But they needed a distraction. Callahan's mind worked fast. He grabbed a plasma grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, and lobbed it toward the far side of the chamber. Boom! The explosion rocked the room, sending Xal'Zor warriors sprawling. It worked. For just a second, their attention shifted, and Callahan made his move. He sprinted toward the throne, ducking under incoming fire, weaving between fallen bodies. Craxus finally stood, his massive form casting a shadow over the battlefield. "You think you can stand against me, human?" he growled. Callahan didn't slow down. "You talk too much," he shot back. The Overlord roared, drawing a massive twin-bladed war staff. Callahan lunged. The clash was instantaneous, bone-crushing strength against sheer, brutal tenacity. Craxus swung the staff, nearly taking Callahan's head off. The Marine ducked, twisting to fire point-blank into the Overlord's chest. The bullets bounced off. Armor plating. Callahan gritted his teeth. Craxus backhanded him, sending him slamming into a console. Pain exploded in Callahan's ribs, but he fought through it. Craxus loomed over him, raising his staff for the killing blow. "You are weak," the Overlord sneered. "You are nothing." Callahan smirked through bloody teeth. "Then why are you bleeding?" Craxus frowned. Then he looked down. Callahan's combat knife was buried in his side, wedged between the armor plates. Craxus snarled, yanking the blade free, but the damage was done. He staggered, and Callahan was already moving. He grabbed a fallen plasma rifle aimed it straight at the ship's primary interface, and pulled the trigger. The shot ripped through the console, sending out a cascade of energy surges. Alarms wailed. Lights flickered. The ship trembled as systems began to fail. Callahan turned back to Craxus. The Overlord was glaring at him, realization dawning. Yeah, Callahan grinned. I just did that. The command center erupted into chaos. With their ship's core crippled, the Xal'Zor panicked. Some tried to fight, others fled. Vance and the private fought their way toward Callahan. We need to go, Sarge. Vance yelled. Callahan nodded. But before he left, he turned back to Craxus, who still stood, fury in his glowing yellow eyes. You should have killed us when you had the chance, Callahan said. Then he turned and ran. The ship was falling apart. Explosions rocked the corridors as they raced back to the hangar. Xal'Zor warriors lay in heaps, either dead or fleeing in terror. The stolen transport was still there, smoking, battered, but intact. Get in. Callahan barked. They piled inside. Callahan jumped into the pilot's seat, slamming his fists against the controls. Come on, come on. The ship roared to life. Outside the hangar, the Xal'Zor fleet was in chaos. With their flagship crippled, their coordination was falling apart. The human fleet was pressing the attack. Callahan grinned. He gunned the engines, the stolen ship blasting out of the hangar, just as the flagship was consumed by internal explosions. They barely cleared the blast radius. The flagship erupted behind them, a chain reaction tearing through its massive hull. Callahan watched the destruction, breathing hard. The comms crackled to life. Sergeant Callahan, Admiral Hayes' voice came through. I don't know how the hell you pulled that off, but whatever you did, the Xal'Zor are breaking. Their forces are retreating. Callahan let out a breath. Good, he muttered. The private let out a wild laugh. Holy shit, Sarge, we did it. Vance chuckled. Damn right we did. Callahan sat back, exhausted but satisfied. The Xal'Zor thought humans were weak. They thought humans were nothing but prey. But they learned the hard way. Never underestimate a Marine. As the human fleet pushed forward, driving the enemy back, Callahan allowed himself a rare moment of peace. For now, at least, because there would always be another battle. And when it came, he'd be ready,